Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll call this regular meeting of council for December the 3rd, 2019 at 7 o'clock to order. And we'll ask everybody please stand and we'll do the national anthem. Okay, I will read the land acknowledgement statement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. So now I'll ask any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Okay, I have an issue when it comes to the committee selection. I have completed the paperwork and filed it with the clerk, and I will be absent during those choosing of the people for those committees. So, okay, and we're going to do now with great pleasure our Christmas card presentations to our two students, Keita Haynes and Britton Den Beston, and we're going to have a nice presentation up the front here right now. So. Okay, we'll now do Mayor's remarks. Please note that these proceedings are being broadcast, live recorded, and made available through the Township website and YouTube. Also, if you have a phone on ring, please put it into silence mode so that doesn't interrupt the meeting. Township staff and I have been working closely with the Minister's office and our MPP, that's the Minister of Municipality and Housing up in Toronto, Minister Clark, regarding our recent storms. If you've been impacted, it's really important that you contact us at cemc@wainfleet.ca to ensure your information is captured should there be any relief program become available. That's on our website, so it's right front and center on the website, so you can look up that email address on there and register your damage. Congratulations to our township planner, Sarah Ivins, on her graduation from AMCTO's Diploma in Municipal Administration. What does that stand for, Sarah?
It's the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario.
Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations. The Police Services Board will meet on Thursday, and as everyone knows, I'm on that board. Regional Council will meet later that same day, and if social media is any indication, there's lots of interest in that meeting that date with regards to the issues at the region, past issues, I'm going to say. Our township offices will be closing early Monday, December 23rd, and will reopen Thursday, January the 2nd. On behalf of council, I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a safe holiday season. Our New Year's levy will be here in the council chambers Sunday, January 5th from 1 to 3. Everybody is invited to come in. There's light refreshments, and councillors are here. You can speak to councillors and talk about issues, and it's a very relaxed, open forum. And our next regular meeting of council is being held on Tuesday, January the 7th. Okay, councillor announcements or remarks. Are there any remarks from any of the councillors? Councillor Cridland?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. It was a great turnout for Christmas in the Village, so I got to attend that. The second thing is that I have registered for a delegation for Roma that I'm working on. This will be my first Roma conference, so I'll keep you updated. And then December 18th is the next regular meeting for the MPCA board.
Thank you. And for those out there, Roma is the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, right? And so small municipalities, rural municipalities get together and discuss issues common to everybody. Okay, looking now at the adoption of the previous council minutes, is there anything there from any of the councillors that we need to discuss? Any concerns there? Okay, that's 2 sets of minutes. One for November the 12th and one for the November 27th, and so those are both passed. And I now look to Carolyn Riel, please, Director, Niagara Region Transportation Services, and Frank Tasson, Associate Director, Niagara Region Transportation Engineering, and this is the services 5-year forecast. So thank you very much. We try to keep it to 10 minutes, so if we can carry on, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us here this evening. Both Frank Tassoni and myself are pleased to be here. Just to put some context on what Frank and I have been doing out of Transportation Services is we've been going around to the different municipalities throughout the region, and we've been giving highlights with regards to our 0 to 5 and our 5 to 10 year capital budget ask with regards to infrastructure that we're going to be putting into the different communities around the municipalities. So we feel that starting this program, which we've rolled out this year, is important so that the region has an opportunity to come forward, obviously to let the municipality know the works that we're targeting in the next 5 years, so that we have an opportunity to work with staff closely on any partnerships or any programs with regards to some of the works we're going to be doing here in the municipality. So thank you for having us. I'm going to turn it over to Frank. He's going to be giving the infrastructure update, and then I'm going to close with just some larger regional vision items that we're going to be rolling out starting in 2020.
Okay, just before we start rolling with some of the projects that we have for Wainfleet for the next 5 years, I just wanted to explain the region's capital program. So our capital program is broken into 4 major parts, those being number 1, network expansion, which is our program for expanding roads. So we're moving roads from 2 lanes to 3 or 4 lanes. We're extending roads. Anything that expands the actual regional network would fall under our network expansion program. Our next program is our intersection improvement program, which is where we isolate intersections and do geometric improvements to intersections to assist with both geometry and the level of service that intersections function at. The third program that we have is our road rehabilitation program. So every year we put a significant amount of funds into resurfacing and rehabilitating roads to bring up the ride quality. And the last program is our structure rehabilitation program, which is primarily addressing bridges and major culverts throughout the region. So the first project that I'd like to highlight is Regional Road 45 Creek Road from Wellandport to Canberra. So this project is currently in the environmental assessment stage. We are anticipating completion of the EA document in the spring of 2020. We've ran into some issues regarding archaeological assessments that need to be completed, and due to the weather, there won't be any of that work happening now with the ground being frozen and covered with snow. So our target is to complete that study in the spring of 2020 and then move into detailed design shortly after. In the middle of that project, we have Oswego Creek Bridge. Many of you know this bridge was the subject of an accident last year and had to have an emergency closure and some interim works done to get the bridge through for the next couple of years until our design is complete. But along with the Creek Road project, this bridge will be replaced with a new bridge. Okay, our hot mix resurfacing program, every year the region puts anywhere from $8 to $12 million into hot mix resurfacing. This program is generally geared towards the ride quality and milling off the surface of the road and replacing it with a fresh wearing course. So we go through an annual program of evaluating our road network, and we try to apply this method of rehabilitation to roads that are at a certain pavement condition index where they are ready to be rehabilitated. So we've identified 3 sections of road in Wainfleet in the 5-year forecast that are going to fall into this program, being Regional Road 23 Forks Road from Hewitt to Deeks, Regional Road 23 Forks Road from Feeder to Town Line, and Regional Road 27 from Gracie to Elise. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Carolyn to talk to some of our visioning.
Thank you, Frank. So just in closing, I wanted just to touch on some of the regional visionary items that staff have been working on. And there'll be impacts, obviously, that'll be happening across the region with all the different municipalities. So one of the major things we're doing is our Transportation Master Plan was approved in 2017. So that's our guiding document that talks to, obviously, it talks to future capital and infrastructure improvement, and also talks to different policies and changes we want to make with how we're doing the transportation services business at the region. So one of the things that was highlighted were our complete streets. So a number of the road topologies, for example, rural, semi-rural, urban, they were all outlined, and a piece of work that's coming online in 2020 is something referred to as our complete streets. So what we're going to be doing is, as we're putting out a consulting assignment, we're going to be hiring a consultant to come on board, and they're going to be assisting the region at looking at the different typologies throughout all the municipalities, the regional roads, and we're going to be working with them on a consistent framework with what the cross-section is going to look like for each of those different typologies. So we'll be coming to the municipality as part of the program to speak with a representative who will be a part of the stakeholders group, and then we'll be working to complete a set of guidelines that will be consistent throughout the region, and it'll be something that all the municipalities will be briefed on and in support of as we roll forward, just to keep a certain, again, cross-section that'll be consistent on regional roads throughout all the different municipalities. Another initiative I wanted to highlight right now that's in front of our council for the 2020 budget approval is regional wayfinding. Again, this is a very, very large program that's been in the works. It's been approved through our transportation master plan, and it has to do with how we want to guide residents as well as those who come to the different municipalities on a consistent way across regional roads and into the different municipalities. So it's going to be how we're going to be getting them to specific destinations, historical areas, downtown areas. And again, we'll be putting out an RFP for a consultant to come on board to assist with regards to what the wayfinding principles may be, and there'll be partnership with each of the municipalities on ensuring that we're capturing, obviously, the important destinations and historical significance that would be obviously something they want to capture throughout each of their municipalities. So this is something that's very exciting, these two programs that we're going to be bringing forward, and again, we'll be looking for the partnership with each of the municipalities as we roll this out. For those who may be following some of the stuff going on at the region, we've been rolling out a large safety initiative program. We're referring to it as our Vision Zero Road Safety Program. There's been a lot of work done with regards to staff taking a look at safety and what that means on regional roads. So there is a very large program, again, as part of our 2020 capital ask, through operating to bring the Vision Zero platform down to Niagara region. We'll be looking at new pavement markings, increased signage. We're going to be rolling out red light cameras as well as automated speed enforcement, something that was just legislated through the Premier's office this weekend, and other safety initiatives, because safety is something we've heard loud and clear with regards to speeding and other things, and we've now got action on the table that we're hoping to get approval for to start bringing that forward. So again, we'll be working with each of the municipalities on those impacts across the regional roads in their jurisdictions, but I just wanted to give everybody an overview as to something we're very passionate about, safety, and we're pleased and hopeful that it gets approved through the 2020 operating ask. With regards to the Niagara Escarpment Crossing, and these are larger visionary items, projects that we've been speaking with regional council about, and as well as collaboration with the municipalities. We also have the the Niagara Hamilton Trade Corridor program that's underway. So these are just large visionary items that we're speaking to council about that require hundreds of millions of dollars to bring them online. There's partnerships with MTO, the federal level as well. So again, these are just items that we've been talking about with regards to visioning and getting a lot of the legwork done now, because these are going to be multi-year and they're going to be future programs that we're hoping to get online and get partnerships going. So we just wanted to highlight that. And then in closing, something we continue to work very closely with the municipalities on are developments, so site plans. So we appreciate all the partnership we have with each of the municipalities, with the region providing commentary through the site plan process. We look forward to being a continued partner with regards to that to ensure developments coming online in regional roads obviously are addressing infrastructure and access to those developments as required, with the support of the municipality and with the region. So we wanted to say thank you for having us here this evening. We're happy to take any questions. We'll turn it over.
Thank you to each of you for your presentation. Any questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Glad to hear Creek Road is on the radar. Last term, we had some residential concerns about the condition, quality, mostly speeding on that road. So I'm also glad to hear that you're looking at, specifically road safety. I would hope that you consider, after you finish resurfacing that road and before it becomes a F1 training ground, you just pin the speed limit as low as possible right off the bat, because that road, it's got some nasty sections in it, and houses are very close and a lot of blind corners. So, I'm thrilled that you're going to do it. I just want to make sure that we don't turn it into a racetrack. So.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan.
When you talk about the milling and overlaying, is there any chance that when you're putting these contracts out, that the millings get offered to the local municipality? So we got a lot of gravel roads here that millings might make a whole lot better. And just asking the question, I see my road super laughing at me, but he knew I was going there.
Yeah, so through Mr. Mayor, the millings on the regional roads become the property of the contractor. However, if there is a desire for Wainfleet to obtain some of the millings from regional roads, we can look at the possibility of writing that into a contract.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, again, thank you for the presentation. Probably just a general one. So if I'm a homeowner and the paving is going to be happening, I just want generally sort of what's in scope when that happens. So, does it include sort of my culvert, my ditch? And then if there was a safety issue that I was aware of in my street, does that sort of become part of that scope project when they're out there with the pavers? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, when we do our hot mix resurfacing program, that program is aimed at the riding surface of the road only. When we do our hot mix program, we precede that with a culvert program. So our culvert program generally is 1 or 2 years ahead of the resurfacing program. That program is aimed at coming through and replacing any culverts on the regional road that require replacement. The program itself is not aimed at improving geometry. It's aimed at improving the riding surface. If there are intersections that require geometric improvements, those are put into the intersection program. Or in the case of Creek Road, both ends of that project have intersection geometry issues that are going to be corrected as part of that reconstruction. So generally speaking, when it comes to geometry issues, that's a bigger program.
Okay, and Councillor Van Vliet.
Thank you for the presentation. Frank, I have a question about Forks Road. How come the resurfacing is being done in patches and not just the complete road? That road is horrible in the winter when it hits the repatched sections.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, our road sections are broken down into segments. We have to do that for asset management purposes. So when we rate our road sections, they get rated in from cross street to cross street. The rating numbers that we have in our pavement condition index, they regulate when we resurface a road. So it's possible that roads may be resurfaced between road street A and B this year, and maybe 5 years from now it goes from B to C. It's governed by the overall pavement condition index. So we would have looked at that road section, and if we skipped over a block, that would be because the pavement condition index of that section of road is one that is not yet ready for resurfacing.
Can continue. So then it'll just be more or less just a cycle. You'll patch this section, then that section, and it just continues.
Yes, correct. So the overall methodology for keeping our pavements in good condition is to apply different treatments at different times, and yes, it is a cycle. So a brand new road will be looked at for crack sealing after 5 years. It'll be looked at for patching after 12 years, and then resurfacing in the 20th year, and then that cycle starts all over again. And we try to get the most longevity out of our roads as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out to Wainfleet and giving us your presentation. It was excellent, and we are looking forward to 45 getting fixed up for sure. So, thank you. Have a motion to receive this report, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor of receiving it, and that report is received. Okay, the next delegation, I look to Terry Maxner on behalf of the Save Wainfleet Keep It Rural group, and he's going to speak about Lakewood development. And we'll try to keep it to 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing this delegation tonight. I'm sure most councillors are aware of the extensive damage that occurred as a result of the last 3 storms on October 27th, October 31st, and November 27th. These were in close succession, and all had high winds that negatively impacted the already high water table. You also remember the ice storm last winter that also caused significant damage along Beach Road east and west and the lakeshore area. Tonight we have pictures showing this cumulative irreversible damage that has altered the shoreline. This first group of pictures shows the flooding that occurred in the Casey Drain. As a result of high water and winds, the Casey Drain flooded, sending water in the opposite direction of the lake to flood the Lakeshore Road, including several homes across the street from Side Road 18 up to Summerland, and all homes directly adjacent to the Casey Drain also sustained flooding. This flooding, when compared to the proposed draft plan for the Lakewood development, potentially places units 1 to 7 at risk of several severe future flooding. The next group of pictures were taken from the beach in front of Lakewood property and show the result of significant erosion damage from the storms. The removal of 200-plus trees and underbrush that protected this property from surging water left this area generally unprotected. These pictures show exposed pipes, construction materials, cement blocks, drain lines, utility lines, and old foundations. They were once buried beneath the property itself. They now are exposed in the dangerous shoreline that has increased over 30 meters from the lake into the property the last 2 years. This last group of pictures shows what was once a beautiful beach with a gradual embankment to the lake, now has drop-offs and cliffs as its beach frontage. High water, winds, and storms will continue to decrease this lake frontage, seriously impacting proposed units 17 to 33. Beach frontage has now moved beyond the 30-meter lake buffer and beyond the Lake Erie high water mark. This watermark was set by the NPCA as the 100-year watermark. It is now surpassed. The protected Fowler toad habitat that was required by the Ministry of Natural Resources has all but totally been washed away. As councilor is aware, there is an active plan to develop 41 condominiums on the frontage of this property. When first planned, none of this erosion, high water, and exposure to future hazard had occurred. We believe the landscape has significantly changed and strongly recommend to council that before development has commenced, these procedures should be in place. Number one, NPCA be formally asked by council to update the floodplain mapping of this area because the next mapping is not scheduled to be started until 2022, which falls outside the site development plan approval date. And this council, number two, and this council require an updated coastal engineer report to address proper protection from further damage, erosion, etc., that would impact this development on the site. Thank you. Any questions at all, or?
Thank you, Mr. Maxner. Questions from councillors? Councillor McClellan to begin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Maxter. I see you're asking for this particular piece of property. All of the lakeshore was flooded and had shoreline damage from one end to the other in town. Why is it you're just asking for this particular piece of property and not the whole lakeshore? You're asking us to pick on one piece of property and not the whole lakeshore.
You see, the rest of the lakeshore is developed, and it's already been developed to its fullest. But this is brand new development, an entirely different development. It's a condominium, and it's at a point now where any further development or anything of this site has never been brought to Wainfleet at all. And this shoreline now is at risk. If you come down there and looked at it, it was a couple of the councilors came down, and thank you so much for that. We looked at it and saw what is really not devastation, but the erosion is phenomenal. And so to have this condominium, I guess the whole works go on there, and not have a coastal engineer or something at least say what they can do to protect the housing that goes on there. What I was thinking, there's going to be liability later on. Once the developer's gone and everything's gone, the municipality okayed the buildings there, and it's going to be the liability of the municipality to if anything does happen to it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am pretty sure in the site plan agreement there is arrangements for shoreline protection that has to be done. No developer is going to develop a piece of property and not put the shoreline protection in
We
there.
hope not.
I am sure of it. I was further down the lake, and I won't name the property. The people lost 80 feet of land into their backyard. They lost their septic bed. They lost everything. Why is it you are only asking about this again and not, I don't care if it's developed or not, there's other places that lost all of their land. And if we're going to try and go for a floodplain adjustment, it should be the whole thing or nothing. You can't pick on one place.
Well, it was stated as on a floodplain in the first place. And if you saw one of, I think, the fire chief's flood plan of when the presentation he made before, that whole section was all underwater. And it's to build on that now is, like, there's no building on it now. And to go ahead and put something on there in an endangered spot just doesn't seem right. I know, I see what you're
We'll have to
talking
agree to disagree, sir, because I don't agree with you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Any discussion on this? Councillor Van Vliet?
Thank you for the presentation, Terry. So you want us to get this done for the MPCA. What about people who are building right now or have their plans in place right now? Is there any objection to them?
Are they on the lakeshore?
Well, there could be. I'm just saying, what if there was? Because you're singling out this one property that's going to be developed. So everybody who wants to develop, do they have to get an erosion plan?
No, but see, in those small areas where the people are going to develop, most of them can have break walls. This development can't have a break wall. They are
Why?
not allowed to put a break wall in there of any sort because of the Fowler toad. And the Fowler toad was the endangered species. And that was one of the stipulations when they started to bring in the development, that there was no protection going to be allowed on there other than what's there now. There is blocks there now and there's some rock. But other than that, they're not allowed to put a break wall along there.
But with the two recent storms that we had, a lot of the lake got washed away. So I think what Councillor is trying to say is a lot of it's eroded and gone. So I don't think we as a council could pick on one person.
Well, it's not picking on one person, it's picking on a project that hasn't even started yet. Like, you're saying erosion was on different properties, but that was properties that are already in place. Now, this is something that's going to be built. There's nothing planned, there's nothing been put in place yet.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
We're just going
Okay, we're going to leave it at that because we're not into a debate here. It was a question and answer. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Maxner, for that report.
Thank you so much.
And motion to receive it. Discussion first. Any discussion? I think we've had that. Motion to receive it. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Cridlin, all in favor? And that report is received. There was some discussion about referring that to the NPCA, but perhaps we can come back to staff with that at another point and look at that. So, okay, we'll move on now to Mr. Stephen Rivers on behalf of Ted Hessels and Glenn Cook, speaking to recommendations outlined in PSR 12/2019. So, Mr. Rivers, I understand you're speaking on behalf of two, so we'll give you a little leniency on the 10 minutes there, so please carry on.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, council, thank you for your leniency. This is it's complicated and has been an extremely long process, and I hope to move through it as quickly as I can. If I can figure out how to move them. Technology. In 1974, the Wainfleet official plan designated Mr. Cook's land as village residential and rural. It permitted limited non-farm residential development and which was permitted in the rural designation. So that's where we started from in 1974. In 2005, we got the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. In 2007, the comprehensive regional policy plan was reviewed, and the land was designated as hamlet and rural areas, which provided for limited non-farm development in the rural area and, of course, in the hamlet as well. Development of the land for rural residential use is in keeping with the regional policies. I would note the region was then developing a long-range growth plan management strategy, and they're still doing it. In 2008, Mr. Cook applied for an official plan amendment for 16 lots on 15 hectares and provided a planning justification study. Subject land is shown in green on the left-hand image. At that time, staff agreed that including the land in the hamlet and village residential designation was appropriate, and the image on the right shows the layout, or a conceptual layout of how the property would have developed. 2009, Mr. Cook applied for a zoning bylaw amendment, and the official plan designation was rural, rezoned to permit a residential use as his current house that's on the property. At that time, there were no comments received from the Regional Niagara Development Services. In 2010, the new official plan came into effect. The 74 official plan was repealed. There were new OP designations for land in the hamlet and agricultural area, and the agricultural designation would appear to be contrary to the official plan designation, which you'll see later, which was rural. There was limited or no contact with the applicant at that time. Planners requested the withdrawal of the official plan amendment application for simplicity of the OP update. That was which Mr. Cook withdrew the application, and it was supposed to be included as part of the official plan update. That may have been one of the stupidest things anybody has ever done. 2013, we have a new consolidated growth plan. The built boundary for settlement areas were put in place, and generally at that time the built boundary was to follow road center lines, water features edges, and property parcel boundaries, and not necessarily the settlement area boundary. So at that time it was reasonable to have the hamlet boundary extend out to Moore Road North and along the Gord Harry Trail. 2015, we get another new provincial policy statement and an OMB decision on the boundary designations in the regional plan, which solidified the boundaries as shown in this diagram. The white areas are rural, and hence the agricultural designation in the municipal plan as agriculture is somewhat at odds with the rural designation in the regional plan. January 2016, we had the OMB decision on the township official plan with this dispute concerning the delineations. Austrian Corners, the hamlet boundary was removed. At this point, no designation was applied. It was an error in mapping by the region. Basically, the land was in limbo. The hamlet boundaries for Wainfleet are shown in the local official plan, were then accurate and final. Again, limited or no contact with the applicant in this case. February 2016, we submitted a planning justification report. At that time, we outlined that there was no designation and the zoning was unclear. It took us a long time to get anybody to realize that there was no designation, and I'll show you how the zoning is unclear. Matter of fact, we met in June, July, and December of 2016 with pre-application consultation meetings, again outlining that there was no designation and the zoning is unclear. September 6th of 2016, we had a teleconference with the township planning consultant and solicitor regarding the potential OP designations, and again, we outlined that there was no designation and the zoning was unclear. We've been obviously talking about this for some time. Just to indicate that the zoning is unclear, this is the zoning map for the area. There is no zone applied to the broader area around Austrian Corners. You note there's a zone symbol inside each of the darker areas. I look carefully. I can find no zone put in place for the property around Austrian Corners, particularly Mr. Cook's property between the boundary of the hamlet and Moore Road North. January 2017, we made a presentation to council outlining our concerns about, again, the lack of a designation, and the planning department was directed to come back with a recommended process. March 2017, we met with the township and regional planners. Township report on the process to apply designation was brought forward to council. Township sponsored an official plan amendment to apply a designation. The OPA, according to the region comment, is exempt from regional approval. Oddly, at this meeting, we were told to make formal requests and submit relevant justification to the township through the public process, letters, studies, things of that nature. In my over 40 years as a planner in Alberta, Ontario, and many municipalities in Ontario and in Nova Scotia, I have never been asked as an appellant or as an applicant to provide the background studies in advance of a council-directed official plan update. This is something that's been beyond my experience. I've never encountered it. In May of 2017, we have a new growth plan. This process, the length of this process has made the decision-making and the recommendation process subject to several different changes in provincial policy and regional and certainly provincial and regional policy, making it very difficult to target to hit. October of 2017, there was a meeting to discuss the process and possible designations. And again, we were advised to provide the planning justification study, planning justification reports, and additional studies. We have provided a planning justification report for this property, and we have provided an agricultural assessment for this property. To this point, we have received no formal professional response to those documents. The comments and proposals, recommendations regarding this property are based solely on policy. There has been no review of the technical documents provided. Certainly our intention was to provide them in draft form to begin a discussion. That discussion has not taken place. We are not aware at this time of any professional analysis on behalf of the township regarding the recommendation and the proposed designations. Certainly we have no comment back on, in this case, an agricultural impact study provided by Mr. Cook. It's important to point out that the land is not designated prime agricultural in either the region of Niagara or Township Wainfleet official plans. There is an error in the prime agricultural areas designated in the municipal official plans and or identified by OMAFRA of the draft agricultural system. OMAFRA put in place some mapping showing what it considered to be the agricultural system. We commented, the township has commented, the region has commented to OMAFRA that particularly the land within that was within the hamlet had no designation on it, so it couldn't be considered as prime agricultural land by the province. We made that very clear to them. The region's position is the provincial mapping should be revised to reflect the work done by the region and local municipalities. We've seen nothing to indicate that has changed.
Mr. Rivers, you're down to about 3-4 minutes left, please.
I should be through quickly, I hope. Again, as I say, the region submitted comments to the province that the land was not designated as prime agricultural. It had no designation. We have a new growth plan now. In July, the notice of public meeting and the public meeting, public meeting was seeking the agricultural designation. At that point, the township already said it was going to seek the agricultural designation. That is, I find, extremely rare. The public meeting is the time when the municipality hears concerns, hears issues. It shouldn't have made up its mind in advance. And in this case, the notice said it's going to be designated as agricultural. I believe that is, again, in my 40 years, I've never seen that happen. Staff is seeking the agricultural area designation because the agricultural land base for the Greater Golden Horseshoe has identified the area as prime agricultural area. It has not. Region comments, the same thing. The region states all land in the township's notice of public meeting is within the provincial agricultural system designated as prime agricultural area. It had no designation. It could not be designated prime agricultural. Staff recommendations. Staff report recommended that these lands be designated a rural area in the Township of Wainfleet official plan to be consistent with the PPS and conform with the Growth Plan 2019 and the Region of Niagara official plan. This process started over 10 years ago, and each time we try to move forward with it, we're caught up with a new set of rules and guidelines. We would recommend that staff redesignate all the land subject to Mr. Cook's original application as rural area. That would include the land between what was the hamlet boundary, the land that is not designated now, and Moore Road North. Part of what he had originally brought forward an application for and was convinced by the planners of the day at both the township and the region to withdraw. Again, a mistake on his part that just unconscionable. We'd also ask that it rezone Mr. Cook's land to A4. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for that presentation.
We move into the next one?
That was supposed to be both.
Actually, I spoke with Mr. Hessels, and he said he'd give me a few minutes of his time on for his as well.
Okay, that's fine then.
Right. Mr. Hessels, and I'm sure he'll have a few words later as well. Again, 1974. In this case, whoops, I put the wrong map in there. I got Austrian Corps. I thought I changed that. It was agricultural in 1974 for Mr. Hessels' property. Policy statements, growth plan. There we are. In 2007, the comprehensive regional plan showed it as agricultural, or good general agricultural, and the 74 official plan was repealed. The new OP designation of hamlet was put in place by the township. Again, very limited contact, and in this case, the application wasn't withdrawn. New consolidated growth plan. Generally built boundaries were to follow water edges and features to make identifiable edges. The new provincial policy statement, again, designated boundaries of the hamlet of Wellandport and land as good general agricultural. The OMB decision, the same situation. No designation was established and very limited or no contact between the people handling the OMB appeal on behalf of the township and the region and Mr. Hessels or Mr. Cook. Again, through the March of 2016, we started outlining that there was no designation on the property, continued in several meetings through to September. In January, our presentation to council again. We provided in February of 2017 a planning justification report supporting the rural designation and an environmental impact study. The environmental impact was the concern of the appeal, the woodlot at the back of the property. No response has been received to either of those, no formal response from any professional ecologist in regard to the environmental impact study. Again, meetings with the various people pointing out that the situation, and again, the OPA is exempt from regional approval, according to the region. New growth plan. Meetings to discuss the designation, advisors submit the reports again. Again, odd in my opinion, and my experience. It's not designated. It's not part. If it's not designated, it's not part of the agricultural system. Same consideration. New growth plan. We submitted a minimum distance separation study in January 2019. Again, no response. Again, we're not part of the agricultural system of the province. Move on. Again, the staff recommendation reports that, our staff recommendation is that the land be designated agricultural. In this case, not all the land is within the provincial agricultural system, which is not, so it's not designated as agricultural. That's the agricultural system. You'll note the southeast corner of the area is, even the province says it's not part of the agricultural system. The proposal removes only a small area of isolated farmland, which is surrounded by residential and institutional uses. The potential impacts are limited, it satisfies the MDS formula. So we're looking at what you would have to look at to redesignate this land from agricultural to rural. In this case, we're looking at simply putting a rural designation on it and looking at the potential for impact on the agriculture, which is certainly a prime concern. Development of residential in the north part of the subject property will not result in fragmentation of agricultural lands. The north part of the subject property is a small area of land isolated from agricultural uses by provincially significant wetland and significant woodland. While possible, the probability that the natural heritage features will be used for cash crop of any type in the future is, I believe, unlikely. The proposals for limited residential development compatible with the rural landscape and suitable and sustainable by rural levels of service. No expansion of the infrastructure is required. Again, we've had no response to the MDS. While not within the Welland-Port settlement area, the proposal will result in infilling between one residential use within the settlement area and one residential use abutting the settlement area. The proposal is for 3 or fewer lots abutting the settlement area, and the land where the on land where the designation in the official plan permitted this type of development in June of 2006. That's a policy out of the growth plan permitting development in that situation. Just give you an idea of what the infilling is like. It's about 200 meters between the two houses. That does not meet the definition of infilling in most places because it's normally 100 meters. In my experience in other municipalities in Niagara, most notably Fort Erie, council has been more than acceptable of waiving the distance separation between housing units in order to actually have infilling. So it's not something that's unheard of in Niagara to simply waive the 100-meter separation distance.
So just let me interrupt you for a second, sir. You're down to about the last 5 minutes, and that includes Mr. Hessel speaking as well.
I should be real quick. The northern part of the property is not land within the province's natural heritage system. Lot creation and residential development of the northern part of the land will pose no impact on the ecological functions of the woodland and wetlands, according to our ecological study. It's compatible with surrounding residential use. Proposal sustainable development with no significant negative impact on natural areas, features, or functions, only minimal impact on agricultural resources, and is orderly and safe. Direct staff to redesignate the property to rural and deem the proposal to be infilling and rezone it to A4. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hessels, if you want to use up the last few minutes there.
Mine shouldn't take too long here. Okay, yeah, Mayor and Council. I'd like to speak on tonight's Planning Staff Report 12-2019 about the designation that staff is recommending for the Wellandport area. Back in 2010, when the official plan was adopted, the township, the region, held a series of public meetings. The recommendation from the community was for the Wellandport parcel, which consists of lots 739, 87, 739, 65, and part of lot 738, 45 to be part of the hamlet. The township and the region supported and adopted it to be part of the hamlet. The province did have some concerns due to the proximity of the PSW. To address the province concerns, I have had Colvay Consultants do an environmental impact study, which is a reputable firm in Niagara. The outcome of their study has shown there would be no negative impacts to the PSW. I also had them do an MDS study, and that too also showed there would be no impact. Why reverse a decision the township and the region and the community approved of now that the provincial concerns have been addressed? This is an isolated piece of property that is surrounded by residential and institutional properties. With a rural designation, this would fit in with the surrounding areas. This is a parcel that would not need any township resources due to the fact that it fronts two regional roads, like no snow plowing, no road maintenance, and from the township's perspective. With a rural designation, this would be a great revenue source for the township with the increase in property tax that it would generate. From a farmer's perspective, this is not a practical or a prime agricultural parcel due to its size. 2.5 hectares, around 6 acres, is small for any type of farming to be done in this area. And the close proximity to residents and institutions to the east, north, and west of the property give very limited agricultural use for this property. Staff is recommending that you put an agricultural designation on this property, but I believe they should have given you other options like they do with other reports. The other options I ask you to consider is that you give this a rural designation due to the fact that the provincial concerns of the PSW have been addressed and there have been no negative feedback from any residents or the community pertaining to these properties. Thank you. So I don't know if there's any questions. For
Yes,
me or
any
Steve.
questions from any of the councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you for that. So I have a motion to receive both Mr. Rivers and Mr. Hessel's reports, please. Motion by Councillor McClellan, seconded. Councillor Quidlin, all in favor of receiving those, and those are received. Thank you. Okay, staff reports, review of citizen applications, and I'll ask our clerk to speak to that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of Council. Council will recall that 2 new committees were established in October, one being the Age Friendly Advisory Committee and the other being the Recreation Community Events Advisory Committee. A call for applications for both committees were advertised in the newspaper, Township's website, and Facebook page. Applications were made available electronically on the Township's website and a hard copy at the Township office, Public Library, and Arena. We received 11 applications for representation on the Age Friendly Advisory Committee and 2 for the Recreation Community Events Committee. Council will review and discuss the qualifications of citizen applications under the closed session portion of our agenda. The appointment of members will be made by motion in open session during Rise and Report, along with the appointment of a council representative. The original intent was to incorporate the 2021 Summer Games event planning into the mandate of the Rec Committee. You will see that staff is recommending that council reevaluate the mandate of the Recreation and Community Events Committee to the future, and allow staff to focus on the recruitment of members to assist with the event for the summer games.
Okay, I look to council for any discussion, any questions, comments? Councillor Cridlin, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. I'm just going to say I like the options that staff have come back with based on not filling the Recreation Committee, and it's a great read on the community for us to know exactly where we are for council at the moment as we move forward with other recreation plans. So I think that's a good recommendation. I'm ready.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, so the recommendation from staff is that this report respecting the review of citizen applications for the advisory committee be received, and that council will review and discuss confidential applications received for the age-friendly advisory committee and the rec committee, and that council appoint 8 citizens and 1 member of council to the age-friendly advisory committee, and that we're going to redirect and reevaluate the placement of the Community Events Advisory Committee and look at that in the future. So have a mover for that, please. Councillor Cridlin, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor of that? That is carried. The next item is a memo from our bylaw officer with some amendments to the AMPS bylaw. And we're going to deal with that after, but I just need a motion to receive this, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor of receiving that memo, and that is received. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into the planning staff reports, and that is relative to the presentations we heard tonight on the designation of zoning for those properties. And I would like to open that up to discussion. So, but the first one, let's deal with get ahead of myself here. Thank you. David Riley will speak to the first report here, and we'll be able to ask him questions. So if you would, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is David Riley with SGL Planning. I've been working with Sarah to over the past while to prepare this report. So I'm going to just provide a brief overview and then happy to answer any questions. So Mr. Rivers provided a good background in terms of what's happened with the official plan, how it was adopted in 2010. Approved by the OMB in 2014, and then the appeal was settled in 2016 with respect to the hamlet boundaries. But essentially what this did was it left 3 areas, so one outside of Welland-Port Hamlet, one outside of Chambers Corners, and one outside of Austrian Corners, all without land use designations. The 4th kind of area that we're dealing with through this staff report is an area on Tunnicliffe Road on the west side, which is a property that's currently designated agricultural, and staff was directed to look at if this property could be redesignated as rural. So that is also discussed within this staff report. So just to be clear, this official plan amendment was meant to apply come up and evaluate what designation should apply to all of these lands, as well as consider the redesignation of the Tunnicliffe Road lands. It was never considered to be an expansion of settlement areas or to permit hamlet land uses on these lands. Essentially, the exercise was outside of hamlets, other than recognizing, the official plan recognizes rural and agricultural areas as well as existing uses, such as some industrial uses that are existing. But other than that, everything is rural or agricultural. So we were looking at, should these properties be rural area or agricultural area? It's not a question of, I've heard the term reversing the designation. The designation, yes, in the adopted official plan was different because these lands were part of the hamlet, but we cannot consider these lands for urban land uses anymore because they're not within a settlement area. So they have to be rural or agricultural. Mr. Rivers mentioned that some submissions were made with respect to some of these properties. So with respect to the Welland Port, Mr. Hessel's property that he was speaking to, there was a planning justification report and a draft environmental impact statement and a draft minimum distance separation report. With respect to Chambers Corners, there were no reports submitted. However, there was a request from one of the property owners to redesignate the lands as rural. With respect to the lands outside of Austrian Corners, there was a planning justification report submitted, as well as an agricultural assessment, which was, it comprehensively addressed minimum distance separation, as well as agricultural capability and agricultural production. Similarly, for the lands on Tunnicliffe Road, there was an agricultural assessment that considered minimum distance separation as well as agricultural capability. And there were also some letters from the owner's planning consultant that were submitted. On this study, on the agricultural study related to Tunnicliffe Road, the township hired a peer reviewer to review that report as well. Comments were received from at the public meeting that was held in the summer, as well as comments from Niagara Regional Planning and Development Services staff. Generally, the report outlines the analysis and recommendations in the report. We look at the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the Region of Niagara official plan. So overall, these policies call for, outside of settlement areas, the protection of continuous and productive land base for agricultural uses in the long term. So this is referring to prime agricultural areas. I heard some reference to say that certain lands were not prime agricultural areas. However, if you look at the growth plan, there was reference also made to the OMAFRA agricultural mapping. And in this case, that mapping doesn't apply, although it does designate or identify, I won't say the word designate, some of the lands that we're talking about today as prime agricultural lands. But what the policy and the growth plan says is that that mapping doesn't apply until the upper or single tier municipality, in this case Region of Niagara, implements that mapping through their official plan review, through their next municipal comprehensive review, which is currently underway. So as it stands, the policy in the growth plan says what's designated in the upper tier municipality, which is the Region of Niagara official plan, what's designated today as prime agricultural, and in the Niagara Region official plan, that term is called good general agricultural lands. Those are prime agricultural lands. So in the case of all of these properties, with the exception of Austrian Corners, the lands outside of Austrian Corners, which are designated rural area in the regional official plan, the rest of them are agricultural area, or good general agricultural area. So we did review all of the studies submitted. Many of them were in draft form, but we review them through the lens of provincial policy that applies and regional policy. And with respect to Austrian Corners, those lands are designated rural in the regional official plan today. If you look at the township official plan, many of the lands around Austrian Corners that are agricultural, they're not rural designated. However, given that the rural designation applies in the regional official plan, and the analysis that was provided in the planning justification report, as well as agricultural capability and minimum distance separation that were addressed in the report, the recommendation for those lands, and again, just the portion of those lands that do not have a designation today, is that they be redesignated for rural. For the remaining lands, after our review of the reports that were submitted, it was our recommendation, which is outlined in the report, that these be designated as agricultural and the Tunnicliffe Road lands be kept as agricultural designation. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's deal with these one at a time to keep it clear. We'll deal first with the Wellandport piece of property owned by Mr. Hessels, which he spoke to. Is there any questions or concerns or comments about that property? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. You had stated that the continued agricultural on the Wellandport land. So it's 6 hectares. I mean, sorry, what is it?
6 acres.
It's 6 acres. I'm a farmer. That's not farmland. If you got a huge combine head getting in there, like I don't know with the in and out, like I know where the land is, but I don't know like how big the culvert is. That's not, you're not getting a lot of return for what you're putting into that. You're not getting, I don't know how many bushels you're going to get per acre, but for 6 acres, that's not continued agricultural land in my sense as a farmer.
It's a good comment. It's my understanding that those lands, the larger property in the middle, is currently being farmed.
Is it not broken up by a wooded land?
The woodlot is
south.
Exactly, it's to the south. So yes, from probably the remaining piece of that parcel, it would be broken up, definitely, because there's a residential property on the edge of it. So it's not physically continuous, but because it's still being farmed, that was the recommendation.
I'm just thinking.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, you were next.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So first off, your mapping pictures are lousy. You should use Niagara Navigator that shows where the woodlots are. I've been out to all of these properties that you show here. This one in Wellandport is cut off, and the only way in is off of the road. So you come out of your big field, you have to take your combine head off, you have to tow it over to the other property with a pickup truck. He drives in and drives on your crops. Then you drive your combine in and you have to hook the thing up. Councilor Van Vliet is right. This is not a farm lot. This is, in all common sense, should be rural and let some houses go in there. This is ridiculous.
Councillor Gilmore.
Well, in light of my colleague's comments, I totally concur. I mean, 6 acres, it's not worth the time to drag the combine there and the head and goof around for 200 bushels of soybeans, maybe on a good year, that you're going to send to China. So I totally agree that, you know, that property's landlocked. Have you been there, Dave?
I have not been on the property, no.
Yeah, well, I'd suggest you maybe have a site visit, because you can't get any other field from there, either because of the bush or the 2 adjacent already residential unit properties, mainly the one to the east. I mean, the road limits the other one. But yeah, it's a postage stamp. It's ridiculous. And unfortunately for me, I've been the only one that's actually had to go through this rolling donut from the last term. And I sympathize with these and the other landowners who have been all over the map with various upper tier levels of government not being able to make up their mind, and then at the end of the day, leaving us with nothing, no designation, so we get to decide. So, I mean, I guess we'll get to the end of each parcel and then make a recommendation, but, I mean, I want to kick basically all these back to the region and figure out how we're going to apply some common sense to all of them. But we'll do them one at a time, as the mayor suggested.
And Councillor Cridlin, you had comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I want to acknowledge the staff work that's gone into this, and I like the decision that they've made in terms of preservation. The intent wasn't to expand after the hamlets, or after it was thrown out of the hamlet. Having said that, that sounds like there's some steps involved that maybe we could just talk process. If not this, then what planning or what township options are for, I guess, let's do one piece first for this particular one, and that might help us as well. Thank you.
Okay, I look to our planner to speak to that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if council wishes to designate these properties other than what we have recommended, so for example, Wellandport, if you wish to designate these as rural, council does have the ability to make that decision this evening. In terms of process, I would then ask the clerk to withdraw the bylaw that's on the agenda for this evening, because as written, it shows agricultural area. So I'd have to amend that bylaw, and then that bylaw would come forward in January for adoption, and it would show the appropriate rural designation as decided by council this evening. Our recommendation is coming from a review of planning policy, and we feel that a rural designation isn't appropriate. Council can still make that decision. Now, if that bylaw is passed and that decision is made, that decision is appealable. I can't speak for the region. I don't know if they will appeal, because certainly they have supported an agricultural designation on these lands as well. But it is open to appeal. So if that were to play out and they were to appeal, they could call Dave and myself to appear on their behalf to provide evidence, because our recommendation is in line with what they would like. And council would have to hire another land use planner to provide evidence to support the decision of a rural designation. So in terms of process, that's how, if council wanted to change or do something different than what we've recommended, that would be the process. But you can make that decision this evening if you wish. It would just be a matter of motion, and then we would come back with that bylaw to reflect that decision in January.
And actually, what we can do, if everybody is in agreement, we'll just change it right here to an agricultural or a rural designation, and then we'll carry on with the other ones if everybody's in agreement. But if everybody's not in agreement, then we'll have to go to a formal process. But at this point, if everybody's happy, we can just I'll make the change right here and designate it as a rural lot. Any comments or questions? Councillor Gilmore?
So just so we're clear, we're just going to make an editorial change in the report at this point, and then at the end ratify all the editorial changes that we may or may not make. Is that just so everybody?
That's correct, because that's why I wanted to deal with them one at a time, because I have a sense that we may have others that we might have to make changes to as well. So if we work through it and make those changes, and at the end we can ratify it. So is everybody content with me changing this to a rural? Okay, seeing no opposition to that. When that is done, we'll change that to rural, please, Ms. Clerk. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Cridlin.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. I just want to catch the steps where we would oppose or be in favor. So that is still going to get read and voted on. We haven't voted on that change. Thank you.
Yeah, as we're going work through each one, at the end we'll vote on them and ratify them. Are you unhappy with that? There's the process? Yeah, go ahead.
So just to be clear, we're making these editorial changes to a complete report, and then we're going to vote on a complete report with the editorial changes. So to Councillor Cridlin's concern, if you have any objection, now's the time to speak on it, because everything that we change editorially is going to come back as one unit. So just my advice, speak now.
Okay, Councillor Cridlin, go ahead.
Through you, thank you, just because of the process we're taking. So your last comment was, is everybody okay with that change from agriculture to rural? So I'm not. So that's just...
Okay, so that will move into a formal process then. So we put that on the floor, and we'll read the recommendation, we'll put it on the floor and discuss it, and we'll vote on it from there if the change is made, so it's formalized. Okay, recommendation PSR 12/2019 be received, and that an agricultural area designation be approved for the reasons outlined in PSR 12/29, for the following properties: 73987 Regional Road 45, Concession 7, Lot 39, and designation numbers there. Part B, part of 73965 Regional Road 45, Lot 39. C, part of 73845 Regional Road 27, Concession 7, Lot 38. Part 2. D, part of 52015 Regional Road 24, Concession 5, Lot 19. And E, part of 52017 Regional Road 24, Concession 5, Lot 19. And that a rural designation be approved for the reasons outlined in PSR 2019 for the following properties. That's for the next one. So disregard that part. So any other discussion on that? We're talking just the Wellandport piece of land right now. Any other discussion? So that is the recommendation. I'm going to look to the clerk here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. So I think we're a little bit confused here. So what we're going to do is consider each of the recommendations separately. How that's going to work is we're going to read the recommendation. That will be moved, seconded, put on the floor for discussion. At that point, any amendments can be made.
So we have read this one now. Recommendation is made. So we need to move it and second it, put it on the floor, right, for any further discussion, and then vote on it from there. So can we have a mover for that, please? The one I just read? Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Gilmore. And discussion. And discussion on the amendment of it. No, it hasn't been made yet. Oh.
Okay, so we moved and seconded it. We're on the floor. We're going to talk about it. Now we can make an amendment to to change the designation from agricultural to rural. So I would move that we change the designation from agricultural to rural for the said properties in Wellandport.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Van Vliet. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. It is now a rural designation. Okay, and now that a rural area designation be approved for the reasons outlined in PSR for Burnaby Road now, part of 11673 Burnaby Road, Lot 14 and Lot 15, and 11669 Burnaby Road, Lot 15, Part 1. And that the land use designation of 5125, oh, that's the next one. We'll get into that one. Okay, well, we'll formalize this, so can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, and discussion. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to David and Sarah. So I guess I should have asked Mr. Rivers this, but is he asking for more land to be designated rural than you're recommending in the report? Am I clear on that?
Yes, I believe Mr. Rivers is asking for the balance of the property that would extend to the east to be also redesignated rural. And the report is recommending only the portion without a designation, which is the highlighted portion on the screen.
Did I hear you say earlier that the land was already rural?
The land is designated rural in the regional official plan. The lands outside of the Austrian Corners boundary to the east of the gray area are currently designated agricultural in the township official plan.
Okay, so Wainfleet says it's ag, the region says it's rural. So if he has an issue with changing that to rural at some point, he needs to take it up with the region. Is that fair?
No, to clarify, the local official plan, so the Township of Wainfleet official plan, is what's saying that those lands are agricultural.
That, and this is open, it's commercial in the area right there. There's a donut diner, there's a LCBO, there's a gas station, there's tire repair shops. I think we should look hard at trying to expand this area into there as either commercial or light industrial. We keep talking, we go to the industrial dinners, we go to the business luncheons. We ask people to come to Wainfleet. Unfortunately, we don't have any place for them to come to. So we need to put it, this has fallen in our lap before there's another official plan. I think we should look at this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cridlin, you have discussion on that?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. Maybe to staff, the picture that we've got it looks like there's two parts. I think that's what the notes are saying as well. So is there a way to do part of this as we start to figure a way forward? So I like the staff's report. Again, I accept that background, but I see that there are two pieces that if there's an interest in growing our commercial footprint, can some of it still be remaining agriculture based on where we are now in the process? Thank you.
So we haven't considered industrial or commercial designations for these properties because they are outside of the hamlet area. So most of our commercial and industrial lands that we have currently designated are either in a hamlet or are reflecting existing uses. So there's really, in terms of making that decision tonight, there's not really any planning justification to support those designations. I would say that if council wants to look at the issue of attracting more industrial and commercial development, that we look at that as part of our 5-year official plan review and start having those discussions. That's targeted for 2021, so we're not that far away. But in terms of making that decision on a designation like that this evening, there's really not any planning justification for that before you today that would support that. We could look at that through an official plan review process, but certainly from our recommendation, we would say agricultural area is what meets both provincial policy and regional policy for these lands.
And just to add to that, there is a policy in the official plan, which is in the agricultural areas policies. It's policy 3.1.3.10. Essentially, this is looking at non-agricultural uses within the agricultural area. And it's saying that it might be appropriate in some cases, subject to a list of criteria that's included within this policy, to consider a local official plan amendment as well as a regional official plan amendment to permit non-agricultural uses. And then the criteria looks at, do we have enough land? Is there land available to have such use within the hamlets? If not, then that's one of the checks of the criteria to say, okay, we can look at these lands to have those within an agricultural area, to have some of those non-agricultural uses. And it wouldn't redesignate the lands from an agricultural area designation. What it would do, it would establish a site-specific policy for those lands within the regional official plan and the local official plan to permit such a use. As Sarah mentioned, this could be done separate from the municipal comprehensive view official plan. It could be done as part of that process. It could also be done separate from that process per this policy, which is in your official plan.
Councillor McCollum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to David and Sarah, this 3.1.3.10, that only allows agricultural related businesses to go in there. Is that correct?
This one is actually non-agricultural uses that it relates to, so it does not have to be related to agriculture.
Okay, thank you. And then through you, Mr. Mayor. So, not being a planner and not having done a lot of this, my question is it for our battle, Sarah and David, is the battle easier if we change this to rural tonight to get it to industrial or industrial later than it is to fight it as agricultural, trying to change it to industrial? Like, I don't want a 10-year battle on this. We have no land. I can't sit here and say we're going to keep raising people's taxes and we got no industry in town. We have to do something here. So I just want to know what's the easiest battle for us to go.
Just to elaborate on that, maybe not providing a direct answer to your question. However, this policy that I referred is within the agricultural area policies of the official plan. So it is applicable to anything that's designated agricultural area. This policy does not exist in the rural area policies of your official plan.
I just have one quick question, David or Sarah. Do we know how many acres this is? Sorry, Sarah.
Roughly.
Just ballpark it.
I can measure it and I'll get back to you in just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Sorry.
So
Sorry, I was getting straightened away there.
Okay.
Councillor McClellan.
through you again, Mr. Mayor. So, having heard what's happened to other people over the years and knowing a little bit about that, where you get bad advice and somebody tells you to drop your case and you do it and it was the worst thing you ever could have done, I really don't want that to happen to us as a council. So, you know, maybe we hold this one up and get some advice on how to do this. Maybe we have to ask for an outside advice on how to do this, just to...
Okay, I just looked to the CEO wishes to comment.
Just one comment through you, Mr. Mayor. One thing I would point out with respect to this parcel is that the landowner, who was part of the consultation process, the report does note that the landowner is requesting that the subject lands be designated rural. They haven't suggested anything outside of rural, commercial, industrial, or otherwise. So any sort of initiative on our part in that sort of direction may or may not be well received by the property owner. So I'd caution that I think that the bulk of the discussions we've been having throughout this entire process has been agricultural versus rural in the areas just outside of hamlets or adjacent to hamlet areas. So I just bring that to your attention, and that might be the sort of interim step that you take now with perhaps a move to something more progressive moving forward.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, both of these properties are inside the hamlet. Part of them are inside the hamlet. That's why I'm thinking maybe we want to defer this and get a chance to talk to the landowners. I mean, their taxes aren't going to go up because they're going to, if it's farming it and they're farming it, they don't pay industrial taxes. So it's something we might want to talk to them about.
Okay, so are you making a formal deferral motion here?
On this piece of property, yes.
On this piece of property?
Yes.
Okay, then Councillor Cridland's second. And all in favor of deferring it? Okay, we'll defer it and work on it after.
So
Okay.
through you, Mr. Mayor, just before moving on. So what we've had so far is this report has now been discussed in its entirety. You've reviewed the Wellandport property, and you've made a move to change that designation, or establish that designation as rural. You've considered the Ostrahan Corners property, and you've identified that as rural as well. You have reviewed the Chambers Corners property, and you've deferred that pending further analysis and discussions. And the last property is the one that was recommended to be agricultural, and you agreed. No, you changed that to rule as well. My apologies. So all the changes to rule, one deferral.
That was a lot of work we got done there. It was a little confusing, obviously, but we got through it. Okay, we're going to move on now to Planning Staff Report PSR 13-2019, and that is about the official plan amendment regarding the bylaw amendment for the Highway 3 proposed joint fire and emergency services facility. And is there discussion? You wish to speak to that, Chief? No? Anybody? I'll ask Sarah to speak to it then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just give a brief overview. So we had a public meeting back on November 12th regarding these applications. So it's for a township-owned property in Chambers Corners at 42143 Highway 3. The intended use of that property is for a future fire station or a joint emergency services facility. In order to permit that type of use, we needed to redesignate it to an institutional designation under the official plan, where it's currently village commercial, and the zoning amendment seeks to change it from a development D zone and hamlet commercial C2 zone to a public P zone, which does permit that type of facility. In my report, I've kind of gone through the appropriate policies at both the provincial and regional level. I have recommended that in the zoning amendment that a site-specific be added for a 5-meter rear yard setback, and that just recognizes an existing setback for that barn that will remain on the property with some modifications. So the zoning bylaw requires 7.5 meters. As a setback for any adjacent lands other than residential. But I feel the 5 meters is still an adequate separation between the uses to the south. And again, it just recognizes that existing setback and gives some room for future construction of a fire hall. In terms of comments, I go through those in detail in my report. We had supportive comments from the Ministry of Transportation in the region of Niagara. They did have some requirements for a future site plan application that will be required. So the intent of this report and these applications before council is just to establish the land use that would permit a joint emergency services facility. There are still a lot of steps that need to occur before that is actually realized, including consideration by council for budgets for such a structure and a site plan application in terms of siting of the property, the building, and RFPs and tenders for the building. So this is just to establish the land use to allow that process to continue forward.
Thank you. Any discussion, comments? Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, certainly to all staff on all the work you've done to get us this far, this fast. I'm going to use this moment just sort of to maybe test the waters. I know that there's been a lot in terms of political climate to move us fast through this process, and it's been great. But I'd like to hit the pause button. I think we get to hit the pause button now that we're not in a forced amalgamation situation. And I'm not sure if my other councillors would like a second look. I'd probably just look at it, a chance to look at and revisit our timeline. So my thoughts are that we had a certain timeline under certain political context. All the work's been done to get us there. Thank you very much. But I'd like to consider pausing now and giving this a second thought in terms of timing. And I would appreciate other councillors' comments on that. Thanks.
When you say pause, can you give me an idea what that means?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm just looking for like a new timeline. I don't know what our timeline was for getting, a building up. But whatever that timeline was, I'd like to revisit it in the context of no external pressures now driving a timeline. So if there's a check-in for us that lets us realign resources, budget, et cetera, I think there's been a big shift in what might have been a priority based on a timeline with, with the change in the political climate. So it's just to revisit it, and so seeing a new timeline based on that would be great.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand where Councillor Crenlin's going. We have not seen any budgets for what this building is going to cost us, this facility is going to cost us. There was a big panic to get this before the amalgamation. That's not going to happen right now. Do we at least get to see some preliminary numbers of what this building is going to cost us? We can change the zoning any council meeting we come to. So maybe we do have to pause a little bit and see what's coming at us and what the size of this building is, what the budget is. I don't know that anything about it. I see a drawing that has a preliminary building on it that's outrageous as far as I'm concerned, but maybe that's just a placeholder. We need to get some more details, and I'm going to second her motion.
Yeah, it was just comments at this point, so, but we'll, so just, first of all, the driving force behind this fire hall was never amalgamation, never ever. That was not any part of why we were moving forward with it. The ballpark number that has always been thrown out is somewhere in the $4 million mark. That has been based on other fire stations in the area. Our fire chief has done a lot of research along with our operations manager, and that is the going kind of rate for not a big building either, because they're actually raising the prices as we move along. I caution against waiting too much longer, because I think the prices per square foot have gone up even in the last 6 months. I think we were quoted higher prices. So as I've been saying to folks, if we'd have built this 10 years ago, it would have been $2 million. We build it now, it's $4 million. If we wait another year or 2, 3 years, whatever, it's going to be $6 or $7 million. So that's my comments about that. I understand the points about the budget, but we've always, the chief has been coming in with Richard, and the ballpark number has been in the $4 million range for this fire station. My personal fear is if we keep waiting and putting it off, the price just keeps going up per square foot. And I know I was speaking with the chief the other day, and he commented that the prices had gone from, up like $50 a square foot in the last 6 months, and it's sort of, it's getting scary. So in that sense, so to look after the taxpayers' dollar, we've been trying to move it forward. So just to be clear, though, the amalgamation was never in the formula ever, and so that was that point there. So any other discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just perhaps, Sarah, you would like to comment on the pros and cons of delaying, not delaying?
From my perspective, I mean, it doesn't matter to me when we consider this in terms of the land use designations. I know, from other departments, there might be an urgency to get this done. But certainly the intent of what's before you this evening is just to get those permissions in place. There's still a long road ahead of you before something gets built. But I don't have a preference as to whether this gets done tonight or at a future meeting, other than, we've had the public meeting and the report is prepared, and under this current policy regime. So I don't know how long we wait, if things will change from a provincial or regional level. But it doesn't matter to me whether this is considered tonight or another time. But the benefit of considering it tonight is you do have those land use permissions in place for when you did want to get the ball rolling, from deciding what kind of structure in a future site plan application. So those are my comments.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to continue that, yeah, I understand where my colleagues are coming from, although I don't see any upside to postponing this decision on the zoning change. So we don't have a motion, so right now we're just talking. So unless, with the lack of a formal motion, we need to deal with the one that's in front of us.
Councillor Van Vliet?
I like where we're going with this, with the zoning. I don't think that we should put a pause on this. Once we change, if we vote tonight to change the zone, then all departments can go forward and do what they have to do. It seems in the past, everything has been slowed down, and now we're paying for that. With a pause put on all of our projects, us as a council now has to pull through and finish things up. So I'm just thinking we don't pause it.
Thank you for that. Could I ask either the chief or Richard, just to my comment there, we've been working on this for a year, and I can't remember the number, but the change in price of per square foot, or just can you give us some background on the research that you've done on that, please?
Yeah, to you, Mr. Mayor, and all members of council. When I did the business case in budget deliberations in February, March, at that time I was using a bunch of different consultant reports that had been prepared to other municipalities, and at that point they were running about $300 to $325 a square foot. Fort Erie has just completed their tender process, and they're upwards of $400 a square foot. Welland is building their new headquarters, and they're over $400 a square foot, and the city of Brantford's doing their joint fire EOC building, and they're upwards of $600 a square foot. Knowing that this is a joint facility, it's not going to be a satellite station, it would be reasonable to expect us to be anywhere between $350 to $400 a square foot. With that said, $4 million gets us 10,000 square feet. Again, that's a fire station, emergency operations center, administration, and a EMS. EMS has requested 3,200 square feet. So that leaves 6,000 for fire.
Councillor McCall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the last numbers we were quoted in this town for a satellite fire station was $433 a square foot. That was 2 years ago, and I'm pretty sure Mr. Nan can confirm those numbers. So the numbers haven't changed. It's there. The little one that went up in Camden that's a tiny little fire hall, remote fire hall, was over $3 million. They paid through the nose for it. The numbers are the numbers. I want to know what we're building, where we're going. As Sarah said, we can change this in a heartbeat. And the only thing, so far, nobody seems to be showing us any details. So we need to know what's going on. We were around the other day, they talked about digging a pond. We don't even know what the plan is for the land, and we're going to start digging ponds. That's not right. That's not how you do business.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Vliet.
I think we're getting a little off topic here. I'm just wondering if we can call the question on the motion here.
Okay, it's good discussion anyways. The recommendation is that the planning staff report 13/2019 be received, that official plan amendment OPA 03 for lands described as 42143 Highway 3 Concession 4, part of Lot 20, Township of Wainfleet be approved for reasons outlined in PSR 13/2019, that the bylaw to adopt the official plan amendment attached as Appendix B be adopted, that zoning bylaw amendment application Z4 2018W for lands described as 42143 Highway 3, Concession 4, part of Lot 20, Township of Wainfleet be approved for reasons outlined in PSR 1329, and that the zoning bylaw amendment attached as Appendix C be adopted, and that the applications are deemed to be consistent with the provincial policy statement of 2014 and other matters of provincial interest. Is there any discussion? Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Van Vliet moves it, seconded. Councillor Gilmore, discussion. Councillor Crillon.
Through you, Mayor. I'll make a motion then to defer.
Okay, seconder for that motion, Councillor McClellan. Is there a date that you would like to defer to?
just the length of time would take to get an updated timeline. I think that will facilitate the process.
January meeting, January or February meeting?
January meeting's fine, thank you.
Okay. And I'll call the question. All in favor for the deferral? And opposed? And that is not carried, not deferred. So now we go back to the main motion. And any further discussion on that? Okay, I call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And it is carried. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the Public Works 15-2019 retaining wall project, and I look to Mr. Nan to speak to that, please.
Through your worship, to all members of council, this is a project that was submitted in the 2019 budget deliberations, and it originally was scoped for building a retaining wall for a unprotected hazard that was identified in our road safety study in 2017. Upon further review of the project, we met with the residents and we expanded the scope because we heard additional comments regarding drainage issues and flooding issues. So when staff reviewed the entire area, not just including the retaining walls, but some of the previous drainage issues that were installed in the area have failed to do what they were supposed to do. So staff are recommending that we try and encompass all the entire project in the scope of the work rather than just trying to piecemeal it. Because eventually we'll come right back to the same location in another project to fix the drainage. So staff has reviewed it, talked to the residents, they're all on board. The issue becomes is we don't own land. The road allowance itself is actually 6 inches in some sections of this project. We actually own 6 inches past the edge of the road. In some sections, including where the drainage outlet is that's existing, is actually on private property already, which was installed years ago. So we've spoken to all the residents, including the ones that we've installed private infrastructure or public infrastructure on private lands. They're all in favor with trying to fix the entire problem rather than just fixing the safety issue. So because of that, we've got permission from all landowners, but because of the scope is changing and we're actually installing a storm sewer now, we require additional studies, which is including an EA, potentially an archaeological. We're not sure if we're going to get that far involved in it yet. We're just in the planning processes. But because it took me pretty close to 6 months to get finalized comments from Hydro and Bell Telephone, for instance, because their infrastructure is also on private lands, and we made an assumption at the beginning that they had an easement, which they don't as well. So all this infrastructure has been placed on private property without comments in the past or concessions in the past. So staff would rather deal with the residents and try and work with the residents rather than going to the step, for instance, of expropriating land. All the residents are in favor because it's going to assist them and help them as well. It's going to stop some of the erosion from coming from all the rainfall that's coming down the road and flooding their lands, as well as us outletting onto their lands. So the plan is to put additional drainage in, catch basins, curbs, plus the retaining wall, which will fix the initial safety issue that was identified in 2017. One of the things that changed since the road safety study, for instance, originally in 2017, if you go by the TAC manual or the engineering manual, at a 40 kilometer an hour speed zone, as long as you had a curb, you can provide, the curb would provide the stop safety zone for traffic. That has since changed, and the manuals and the engineering approvals have all changed. Now you have to provide 3 meters past the curb for the safety zone. So that's why the retaining wall now is actually going to act as our buffer, not just a retaining wall for the erosion factor. So the engineering's not much different, but we want to make sure we include the curb as well as the break wall and the infrastructure as far as the storm sewer. It's all going to be basically built on private property. So we want to go through the steps to do it all at the same time.
Thank you, Richard. Questions to that? Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so this is going out to an engineering firm that's going to design and take liability for all of this and do all that, so we're not on this insurance hook?
Through your worship to Councillor McClellan, yes, the plan is to go out for proper engineering. It may go out for design build, but the initial work weekends to get started right away with an environmental assessment, for instance, which will be contracted out. Geotechnical study, which we have to do for the actual building of the wall portion of it, the retaining wall portion, and any additional studies that still may be required as we move through the process, because the EA may indicate additional things as you go through that. But the plan is to get started with these studies right away, so we can actually have the information we need before we go to engineering.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and we'll have this information by budget time, so we know how much extra this is going to run?
Through your worship to Councilor McClellan, I've made several calls today, and I've actually got 2 firms on board that are giving me quotes within a week to get the EA done. The GO, I actually contacted 3 firms as well, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them. We've also got to do, obviously, survey work and topographical survey work, and our local firm has already been notified in that as well. But I wanted to confirm with council because we're changing the scope from what I originally brought to budget. We want to get permission to go ahead and start the study process so we can get some finalized numbers, hopefully get some numbers by budget time. But the studies do take a little bit of time to do.
And look, thank you, and I'll look to the CAO for comment.
Further to that, through you, Mr. Mayor, the other thing that staff have been looking at is a new Province of Ontario investing in green infrastructure fund for smaller communities. Now, this project that we're talking about now, we had previously applied for funding assistance and were turned down. But there is a new program that's been announced in late October that is open until January 22nd for applications. And it deals with improvements or rehabilitation of water, wastewater, and stormwater related systems, which we feel this may be a candidate for. It's our understanding that the provincial program is going to be extremely competitive, but at the same time, we are also looking at it to potentially ease the impact on our budget. So that is something we'll be looking into some more as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Critland?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. To staff, Richard, you probably covered this, but when you say we're working with the neighbors in the area, that's fantastic. Is this where we have to have an easement at all when we're doing this kind of work, or is that just standard practice?
Through your worship to Alderman Critland, or Councillor Critland, sorry. We will have basically permission slips and an easement. May not be a formalized easement, but we will have documentation put forth, and we'll have our lawyer review the permission or the granting letters. But we will have all that in place prior to doing any work, obviously. But the landowners right now, in the absence of getting the formalized documentation, have allowed us to at least get started with some of the studies and having people to come onto their properties while we get these studies done.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so the recommendations from staff are that Public Works staff this report be received, and that council direct staff to begin the studies required to obtain the necessary approvals for the project and prepare a new business case to present to council during the 2020 budget deliberations. A mover for that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, we're into correspondence now. And looking at C-264 2019 from Wainfleet Agricultural Society Director. Is there any discussion here? They're looking to have their fees waived for the rental of the fire hall this year for their volunteer dinner. It's already passed. We have a number, the year's been able to get through that through the firefighters for free, et cetera. They're wondering now if they can have that waived. So I was thinking about the grant process, and maybe this is one of those things that maybe not for this year, but it's open to discussion. You guys, you have that documentation?
Through you, Mayor, then, I'll make a motion that we waive those fees for the that request. Maybe we'll make a note. They've acknowledged that, you know, this is not necessarily going to happen this time, so we'll maybe make a note in our response then for future years. So.
Okay, the clerk will speak to this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council, I have actually gotten in contact with them to put this in their application for the 2020 grant process.
Okay, so the motion's been made. Seconder, Councillor McClellan, and all in favor. That is carried. Next item of correspondence is from the Historical Society again, 267-2019. Is there any discussion on that? Ask the Wainfleet Council to consider purchasing a Vimy oak for the cenotaph site. Any discussion, Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Maybe I'll just ask staff, Mr. Nan, just commenting about trees on municipal lands, please. Thanks.
Your Worship, in this case, I believe they're asking for the oak tree to be planted at the cenotaph location. My concern is we keep adding trees to that location. It's getting smaller and smaller, and it's going to take away some of the what the cenotaph was actually built there for. We do have additional lands available. For instance, the parkette across the road. The sidewalks have been poured, and we're waiting for the gazebo, and we've got some remedial work. But again, some of our plantings were, you know, our plan originally was to plant some trees there as well as all our fields out back. We lost pretty much every tree that we had out there due to the emerald ash borer, all the way alongside Road 20, and some of the rest of the park is it's basically just a barren field right now without a lot of trees. So we have additional areas that we could plant the tree if that's what council would like to consider as well.
And Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Nan could answer this. Nowhere in this report does it mention how much is this tree. Is it $100? Is it $10,000? We don't know what we're talking about here.
Through your worship, I'm not sure either this was part of the correspondence package, but it also requests a donation, which I don't exactly know what that means. And I don't know, I didn't go on the site themselves to do any registrations to find out. But the request, if you buy the tree, it also asks for an additional donation, which I'm not sure what that exactly means. And I'm not sure if they put a number to it unless you process an application.
So I did go on the website and had a quick look at it, and I saw this price of $150 plus shipping plus everything else to get it here from Dundas, and then the request for a donation on top of that. So I'm seeing the CAO has the website up. Are you seeing anything that you can add, Will?
Through you, no, Mr. Mayor, I think you hit the nail on the head with the estimated pricing. The only other comment that I could make is that if that is something you'd like to pursue, perhaps that is something we could run through the budget process. Just refer it to budgets. We're not at a stage where we're buying a tree at this juncture in time, and we can deal with that as part of our move forward in 2020.
Yeah, it's not the best tree planting weather right now anyways. So I look for a motion to defer this. Councillor McClellan and seconder, Councillor Van Vliet. And all in favor? And that's carried, and we'll defer that to 2020 budget. Thank you. Okay, next item of correspondence is Crime Stoppers letter, C-274, 2019, asking for a January 2020 flag raising request to raise the Crime Stoppers flag here at our township office. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, a motion to allow that to happen. Councillor McClellan is going to do it. Councillor Gilmore will second that. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. The next item of correspondence is from Wainfleet Seniors Housing Association. This was an initiative that I started to form a unofficial committee to look at developing some housing for seniors here in Wainfleet. I simply got the process started, then stepped back as recommended by Niagara Regional Housing. They're at a point now where they're looking for a little bit of seed money to get them going in regards to some surveys and that sort of thing. They're asking for $800. $800 is not in our budget this year, and so wondering if there's any discussion or thoughts what we can do to help this along, or should we defer to the 2020 budget? Thoughts, discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is this a committee of council? I mean, we didn't appoint this committee, so, and I'm also wondering why we don't roll it in with the age-friendly committee that, you know, put this initiative in their mandate of the committee that we did as council appoint and are going to select the members. So yeah, I'm a little confused because I don't recall appointing this committee. So that's problem number one. And I think that either way, we need to refer the financial request to the budget for 2020, but I'm still also questioning why this isn't rolled into the mandate of the committee that we actually are going to appoint.
Yes, this, as I said, was an initiative I started after having spoken with many people who were looking to have some seniors housing built here. I simply was the start of it to get it started, and then we brought in Adrian Jugli from the region, who is the head housing lady, that sort of thing, and her staff. They recommended that we step out of it as a township, and it's its own entity, independent of the township. So that's why it's not a committee of ours. If it was to be a committee of the township, all that will cease to exist, because there's then it falls under all the rules and regulations of housing development through the region. So it will cease to be before it even gets started. And the initiative was simply, is there any way that we can look at developing some kind of seniors housing here in Wainfleet? So it's a bit of its own little creature, in the sense that and I've stepped back. We have no input now. It's its own functioning thing. They've got a volunteer lawyer. They have a volunteer a banker. They have different people are on board who are interested in making this work here in the township. But it has to stay away from the township. Otherwise, the regulatory rules of all the housing issues with Niagara Regional Housing kick in, and it will not happen at all, period. So all they're doing is, and I understand that it is a bit of a complicated issue, but they're just looking for a little bit of seed money, which they want to pay back once they get started. So yes, it needs to be discussed and deferred to the 2020 budget is my thought on that. Is there anything else on that? Any other questions, discussion? Councillor McClellan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, just so I kind of get it clear. The seniors housing, are we looking for something that is, you know, you move in when you're 55 and you move out when you need assistance, or what, where are we? We're not looking to build nursing home or anything of like assisted living. What is it we're kind of looking at?
Well, it's not us for starts.
No,
This
but I
committee
mean, what is the intent?
The committee is looking at forming some kind of housing that seniors can move into. I don't, again, I'm out of it. I just got it started, but they're not looking at like a senior's home, like that sort of thing, because right away the region kicks in again and all the rules and regulations there. So they are in the process of examining some way, somehow, exploratory to see if they can develop any kind of housing here in Wainfleet for seniors. What that looks like, I don't think they've even got to that point yet. So it's just a committee that is on their own working. They use our facility here to meet, and they're just trying to see if they can't come up with something. And it's all being done sort of as a non-profit kind of oriented process as a committee. And so it's not a committee of our council here at all. Any other discussion? Councillor Cridlin?
No, through you, Mayor, I was just going to add that the time, if we take the time to discuss it at the budget time, perhaps they will have self-funded as well. So I think it's good that we can defer this then till the budget time. Yeah, refer, sorry.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Gilmore. All in favor of referring it to budget, and that is carried. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to quickly lift one more piece of correspondence. I apologize to the clerk for not giving her notice ahead of time, but it is 269 dated November 14 from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I've already spoken to the CAO and just asked him to give us a few comments about the modernization program and the impacts to the township. So if you could just comment quickly on that and update us, that would be great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the correspondence being referenced by Councillor Gilmore is notification from the province of Ontario that rather than proceeding with any sort of whole-scale governance restructuring throughout the province, what instead they are doing is leaving it up to municipalities to sort of take their own sort of step back and review of their organizations in order to provide service delivery improvements to constituents, in order to find and achieve savings in their operations, finding efficiencies in the ways they do things. And in leaving it up to the municipalities, one of the things the province has committed to is some funding assistance to smaller municipalities to undertake certain studies to achieve these goals. The announcement was made last month, and the original sort of cutoff, if you will, for providing notice to the province of intent to apply was Friday a week or two ago. As a sort of preemptory step, we as staff did have a discussion at the strategic leadership team meeting and identified a number of possible studies or initiatives that we could do here in Wainfleet to try and improve the level of service we give to the citizens, to improve the efficiency in the way we do things, to identify gaps, for example, in our infrastructure or in our IT technology that might be able to see improvement and make our services more accessible to a broader range of people. So in doing so, at the staff level, we notified the province that we would be looking at making an application. The cutoff for those applications is this coming Friday. And again, unless there's a clear objection from council, staff will be making those sorts of applications to the province. Again, this is the sort of phase one of the province's assistance with this program. Phase one being study, identifying ways to make things better. And the word is that in the coming year, 2020, once these sort of studies have been undertaken, there may be additional funding money available from the province to actually assist in the implementation of some of these options. So for example, if a study identifies an infrastructure, an IT improvement, an information technology improvement that would let citizens log into our website and book a hall or rent a room or make arena rentals from the comfort of their home, and that requires certain software or certain improvements to what we have now, there may be money coming forward in 2020 to assist with that. So that is the sort of approach we've taken. The primary focus, again, is a sort of organizational and service delivery review, along with a gap analysis of any sort of infrastructure technology that we have here in the township. So that's the sort of direction that we are currently planning on heading.
Okay, any other discussion or questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we move on to the bylaws. And if we can move them in bulk here, B, C, D, E, and F. A has been removed due to the changes on it. And so are there any questions of those? Okay, seeing none, motion that those bylaws be passed, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor? And that is carried. And now I look to Councillor Cridland, who has a motion that she's presenting.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. Does anybody want to take a break? Just kidding. All right, I'll continue. Thank you with your patience. This is from last meeting, and it's on sewage systems. It's a little bit long, I apologize, but I am required to read it. So, whereas Part 8 of the Ontario Building Code regulates the design, construction, and renovation of sewage treatment systems, and whereas the Township of Wainfleet took over administration and enforcement of on-site sewage systems from Niagara Region in 2012, and whereas the Ministry of Environment presented to Council in May of 2019 with a focus on environmental and public health and safety concerns related to suspected sewage disposal malfunction, and whereas the Township Strategic Plan prioritizes community stewardship and directs us to take responsibility for the environment, and whereas many residents have been proactively updating their septic systems to protect the aquifer, and whereas the Ontario government has announced there is no longer consideration of forced municipal amalgamation, now therefore be resolved that the Council for the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet recommit to finding program alternatives to meet provincial regulations as outlined in Part 8 of the Ontario Building Code with the assistance of our jurisdictional partners, and that citizens be engaged to review program alternatives that will meet the regulatory standards required and be respectful of the good stewardship that exists throughout the township, and that current data be made available to guide our alternatives, and that staff be directed to look for funding partners and take the necessary steps during the upcoming budget process to begin this work and formalize a solution that fits Wainfleet. So I think maybe just another, I think I can keep talking to it, or do I just?
Okay, no, just before that, we'll put it on the floor, so I need a seconder for that motion. I guess I should wait till Councillor Van Vliet comes back. We can go. Okay, Councillor Gilmore seconds it. So it's on the floor. So did you want to speak more to it, Councillor?
Just a tiny bit. You know, I guess we'll clarify it through any further discussion, but this is about on-site septics, private septics, and certainly not about introducing any larger municipal sewer system. So I just sort of wanted to put that out there for starters. You know, the little bit of work I've done on it, obviously the staff's done a lot of work so far, but, you know, there are programs out there, and I think we can move forward with finding that something that fits Wainfleet. I welcome your comments.
Okay, I look for discussion. Councillor McClellan, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so after reading this, I made a few phone calls to consultants that I have dealt with in the past, and the nature of a septic system is it's buried. Unfortunately, you can't see it. To tell if it's working and to know that it's working right, you have to dig it up. Do we really want to start asking people to dig up so we can see if their system's working? I mean, this was through an engineer. This was his words, not mine. It's buried. You can pull the lid. You can take a look. You can say, yes, there's effluent in there, there's water in there. But by the very nature of them, they don't eliminate the contaminants that you put into them. They break them down and slowly dilute them, but the contaminants still go out into the aquifer or into the ground. I don't know any other way to fix this than going to a sewer. And we are not the people to do that. We had the Ministry of Environment in here earlier this year. They did not have the appetite to attack it. We had the Director of Health for the Niagara region. They did not have the backbone to say, let's go and do this. I know we don't have the budget to even start this. So I don't know where we're going with this.
Yeah, I look to the CAO because I know we've been also involved with the Ministry of Environment on this, and I look to him for comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor McClellan does recognize that we have had delegations before this body throughout the year. We've also been sort of in fairly regular communication with the ministry, who have identified, for example, our obligations, if you will, under the building code. And I concur with Councillor McClellan in that we don't have the knowledge or the expertise to be able to propose something or examine something or solve something internally by ourselves. But that said, there may be opportunity, and again, just a few moments ago I was speaking about the municipal modernization funding and funding that's available from the province for us to look at services we deliver, services that can be improved, services that will enhance the quality of life for citizens. At this time, I've indicated that we are going to be applying for the grant to look at what we do and how we do it and make things better. This could easily become one component of that sort of external third-party study to bring somebody in, take a look at what we have, what we've been doing, what we haven't been doing, and making some recommendations to us for moving forward. So potentially, if we're successful through the grant process, we may be able to get some advice that would move us forward, as opposed to sort of standing still on this issue. And standing still due to the environmental impacts and all the stuff that we've been made aware of really isn't a feasible option at this time.
Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, earlier this evening, our road superintendent, Mr. Nant, suggested that there was a fund for cleaning up your sewer and stormwater, and that is that something we might ask him for the whole $60 million and see if we can get it through there, because it's a huge number that's going to cost this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a huge number. That Green Infrastructure Fund, I actually participated in a session put on by the province on that. Unfortunately, it does not apply to new construction. unless that is to remediate an existing situation with your existing infrastructure. So while our works to address the stormwater drainage, the existing stormwater drainage in that area could be potentially eligible, sort of new construction related with a whole new infrastructure such as that is definitely not in the cards, unfortunately. We did examine that, and we found that perhaps the most reasonable way that we can move forward was really to have an expert come in, take a look at what has been done, what the issues are, and try to give us some advice to move forward. And it would fit under the modernization funding, we believe, that the province is offering at this time.
Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Cridlin, do you wish further comment?
Thank you. And thanks for the comments. So it's really just to get these things on the floor and, set some kind of a course that we can meet our obligations. So I'm not sure from your discussion if you're suggesting there's an amendment in any of the points here that might be allow this to stand, or we haven't heard from a couple other councillors if they have some thoughts on how to, be moving forward on our obligation. So I don't think what you're talking about excludes going ahead with some kind of jurisdictional responsibilities. Maybe I've missed something there.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, further comment?
My only concern is if there is somebody that is pro-pipe, pro-putting this in, if we have this here, is there anything here that they come back and say, you voted on this, you set it up, now let's get it going? Like I say, I know we don't have the budget to do this, so I don't disagree with you. I just want to make sure there's no wording here that hangs us.
And I look to the CEO, I know he's going over it now, but I know there's lots in process here because we've met with the MOE 3-4 times now. Moving this forward, we've had discussions how to deal with the septic issue. So, it's no determination directly how to do that yet. So I look to the CEO for the comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only comment that I would make is if you wanted to add one additional whereas at the tail end of all your other whereases, referencing the fact that, and again, I don't know the exact wording you want to use, but referencing the fact that, the big pipe solution is not part of the focus of this consideration. You're looking at really dealing with the Part 8 building code, septic inspections and septic maintenance, as opposed to big pipe. Because I concur with council completely. The big pipe issue has sort of come and gone. The decision's been made at this stage, and moving forward, we're focusing on other program alternatives as referenced in the motion itself.
Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you. That's perfect clarification for the direction I was hoping for. So,
Okay, so the clerk has added that in. So is there any other discussion on this? It's on the floor, so before we vote. No other discussion? Humming and hawing? None? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm with Councillor McClellan on this. I think that we're meeting our obligations under Section 8, and you can argue that one way or the other that maybe we shouldn't have gone down that rabbit hole a long time ago, but we are where we are. So, I think that we're, as a township, working through gradually the problems that exist within the township with the current building code inspection requirements. And I want to be careful too that we don't kick a dog that's sleeping by the door that we don't know. So that's all my only comment.
Okay, assuming there is no more discussion or comment, it's on the floor. All in favor? Okay, and opposed, and that's carried. Okay, and now council will move into closed session to discuss item under 239BD of Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations, or employee negotiations. One item, a grievance matter. B, item under 239 Municipal Act, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on to, or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. One item, a matter pertaining to negotiations for the sale of municipal property. C, item under 239 of Municipal Act, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. One item, review of citizen applications to committees. And D, item under 239 of the Municipal Act, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. One item, a matter pertaining to interest in a municipal property. Have a mover for that, please. Move into close. Councillor Quillen, seconder, Councillor Van Vliet. All in favor, and we will move into closed session. Thank you.
Prior to doing so, just to note that Mayor Gibson has declared an interest with respect to the one item regarding appointments to the various boards. As such, he will not be attending the in-closed session meeting for that portion, and instead the deputy mayor will be chairing the meeting at that stage.